There we go. All right. The voice from the data center. All right. Um, so while we get started, okay. So today I'm not gonna go over everything in the slides in the interest of time. Today we're gonna talk about image and sound prompting, which is where it really kind of, gets fun. Um, and there are lots of tools that allow you to do that. Many of them they want you to pay for beyond the subscription that you can access through Clark. But nonetheless, the administrative bits, I think I had a different name here. Um, I think I called it Picture This or something like that. Nonetheless, the reading has changed and there's a new assignment posted. I just handed out a printout for that. I'm not going to do the front stuff, but please make sure you submit things by Canvas. There's a high probability that I'm going to miss something if you email it to me. I literally, and I apologize, but I get a lot of emails, a lot. And so if you send me something, email me something, it often gets buried in the 100 plus a day that I get, no exaggeration. If you want to communicate, use Slack because that is a very focused messaging platform. I don't have all the chatter that I get with email. It is right now registration period for fall classes for the other students and other classes I have. So because I'm a department chair, I get lots of questions about lots of stuff. So I want to make sure I'm responsive to you and to help me help you better, please use Slack to communicate. Okay. All right. Any questions? No? Yes, Mella.
The second week is out. I sent both of them
Okay.
on Canvas.
All right. I'm going to try to search for them, but you said use Canvas, Mella? Oh, yeah. As long as you're using Canvas, I get it. Because it'll give me a list. It says this assignment list, this assignment list. So I'll definitely see it. As long as when you submit, if you got the confirmation, I think it's like graphics confetti or something, and it says something like successful, then it updates. Okay. All right. Any other questions? No? No? Okay. No question? All right. All right. So the corny joke of the day, I'm not going to spend time on. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Any thoughts on that? Same with crows? Because it was outstanding in its field. Okay. All right. So, anyways, and I generated this picture using Copilot, actually, the same license that you have. All right. So to refresh your memory, why is the aspect ratio like this? This is kind of stretched out in ways that I'm not expecting. I hope it doesn't cut off. Um, when we talked about, one of the things we talked about was this enormous probability table. And we said this probability table traffics in relationships between words. It also traffics in relationships between things and images. And those relationships can be things that are nearby or things that are further away. Because if you think about language and you think about pictures, it's not a random choice about what thing follows what. And if you have enough examples of that, you can get pretty good in describing all sorts of relationships for image, for pieces of sound, for pieces of text. And so we've been talking about this big probability table and its actual implementation might traffic for documents in 500,000 different words. That's a lot of words. And this table is maintained across hundreds of thousands of computers, across dozens of data centers dotted throughout the country and around the world. And so, because of all this information, we talked about with prompt engineering the need to be very specific about what you want. Because if you're not specific, your model is going to focus on a really large part of this table, and it's just going to pick something. And that something it's going to pick is most likely not going to match the desired output that you're looking for. And so this was our figure. We've been talking about the large language model, and the implementation of it is done in neural networks or deep networks. And they started out as being tools, as we said, for completing sentences. That's where it all began. And then they said, oh my God, this is useful for other stuff. And that other stuff grew into the large language models that you see now. Okay. And so we talked about how you interact with it. And there are many different ways that you can interact with it. And one of the things I forgot to mention last time is that sometimes it's called an LLM, large language model. Other times they use as a synonym generative AI, right? Or sometimes they just say AI. It's all the same thing, but nonetheless, we said you can give it all sorts of types of inputs. And so you can give it instructions. I want you to generate a document for me that has the following topic, like you saw with the Hormuth's assignment. You can give it examples of things. You can give it, for example, a bunch of styles of pictures or styles of art or styles of writing, and then ask it to generate something new for you in that style. So that's another way of quote unquote teaching it or directing it to get an output that you desire by showing it examples of the types of things that you want. And then there's just the user input. And that is that interactive dance, if you will, with it. And one of the ways we talked about is a good way to get out of it an input or an output rather that you desire is by structuring your instructions to it to start general and to get more and more and more specific. And underneath the covers, when you do that, you can imagine this big probability table. It's shrinking its focus more and more and more and more down to something smaller that more closely matches what it is you desire. Now, sometimes it's not just a single part of that enormous probability table. Sometimes it's a little piece here combined with a little piece over there and another piece over there. And so the name of the game is to learn how to structure your interaction with it so that you force the model to kind of shrink down and focus on more specific stuff. Because when you say an output was quote unquote good, it means that it matches your information need. And language is probably a really bad way to express what you want for these models, right? Because these models trafficking things that aren't just text on a piece of paper. Okay, any questions? No? All right. And so we talked about the types of input, and today we're going to talk about image output, and we're going to look at structuring text, and you can absolutely input an image. And I remember the first week we were together, I uploaded a picture and gave myself the beard I always wanted to, and then, did the Harley. And you can work with all sorts of things, but our initial focus today is going to be more on this first edge, going from text to imagery. Now, when you go from text to imagery, it's kind of hard in the beginning, and I stress in the beginning, because you have to fill in, quote unquote, the details of a picture through words. And there are many different things in a picture that you sort of take for granted when you just look at something, right? And so we'll talk about many of those somethings today. Okay. All right. Any questions? No? Everyone nice and fed? Okay, good. All right. Awesome. All right. I'm sorry. Yeah, I have a box here, but I'm caffeinated. I drink too much of this stuff. So thank you for asking. All right. So you're basically, with a good prompt, telling your AI, look right over here, not over there, but right here. And that's what happens when you increase your specificity when you interact with the model. And you don't want your model to wander around some vast wilderness because invariably it's going to get it wrong. It's not magic, it's a little bit of math and some randomization. Because if you tell it to focus on a part of this enormous probability table that's huge, it has no idea what part you want, so it's going to pick something, and that something is most likely not what you really had in mind. Okay, but the good news is you can always follow up and you can correct it. Sometimes it's just completely off. I was using ChatGPT Pro version to create a reading plan for one of my classes for the entire semester. So I gave it all the topics I'm going to teach for the semester, and I told it the version of the book I'm going to use. So I said, given these topics, can you just tell me the reading plan? So it said, read section this point that to section 3.5, read section 5.7 to this. And then it named a section, section 13.1 to 13.7, but the book only went up to 13.5. There was no 13.6 or 13.7. So I said, hey, there is none. Oh, yeah, 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 you're right. All right. So it's really important to get it to focus. Because if you just give it carte blanche to be able to do whatever it wants, it's going to make a choice from a vast array of information, this probability table that's not going to be appropriate for your needs. Okay. So at the end of the day, one of the things you should burn into your memory is this idea of this probability table and focusing where the model looks when it's trying to produce output. Okay. Any questions? No? No questions? All right. So let's talk about vivid words. So we want to look at how AI creates pictures from descriptions, how it creates sounds from instructions. It's not very good for the Copilot subscription through Outlook, and where these tools are used in kind of everyday life type of situations. And so the idea then, imagine if you will, you're thinking about something, and you're thinking about a house near the woods. Off in the distance is a mountain, and the mood of this imagery, this visual, is it's mystical. So you can almost think of like a sorcery, wizard, magic type of vibe to this picture. So off in the background, your large language model, and I don't know how many of you remember Bob Ross from PBS. Yeah. So imagine you have Bob Ross in the back room and he says, okay, hey, little tree, and paints the tree and does all that stuff. And that's basically what the large language model is doing. It's referring to all this vast set of relationships between words and parts of images and images to words in its enormous probability table and generating something based on what you say. And so thinking of that, well, for an effective visual from words, you're going to go from a vague idea, fill in more and more detail, and the goal is to get a vivid image, right? And that's going to be a little bit difficult in the beginning because when you see an image, well, there's a lot of stuff that our brains is processing for us without even thinking about it that you then have to painstakingly state in text, which can be kind of awkward in the beginning, but once you get used to it, I'm pretty confident that it'll become second nature. So let's start with some exercises in this regard. So anyone here like barbecue? Like barbecue? Yeah. No? You don't like barbecue? No? Fish? No? How about fish? Like a nice grilled fish kind of thing? No? Okay. Um, so, you know, let's imagine, if everyone likes barbecue or some less than others, right? You get a second set of grills and then you get a nice bucket and you soak it right after. Make sure it's when it's hot, but don't ever use the wire brush, right? Because you can, if they break off and it gets in the meat next time, you can literally, someone could die, right? So anyways, so let's imagine this image. Hmm. Baby back St. Louis style ribs. I thought I make rubs myself, and my brother was like, "Oh, you should start a business." I just want to do it for joy. I don't want to do it for make it work, right? I already have a job, don't need a second job. But nonetheless, let me ask you, how would you describe this picture? Delicious. Delicious? Okay. How do you describe delicious? Why is it delicious? What do you see? Tempting. Tempting? Okay, it is tempting. So if I said to Copilot, create a picture for me of delicious, tempting barbecue, is that a large part of the probability table or a small part? What do you think? What are your opinions on? It's a large. So how do we start to get it to focus down? That look here. It's juicy. Okay. It's brown. Okay, brown. What do you see? Tender. It's tender. Smoked. It's smoked. Slightly burned. Slightly burned on the ends. She says cut. Yeah, the type of cut that it is. Okay.
They're barbecue ribs.
It's glistening. You see the light reflect off of it, right? What about the sauce? Is it smooth? Is it silky and velvety? No? Do you see speckles of pepper and seasoning? Right? Okay. It's kind of a hard thing, right? It's a lot of red. You have the smoke ring. You can see the smoke ring here. That's a good cut. And then you have a nice bark on the end, Okay. And then you see this sort of pattern of the ribbon, right? It's sort of like the waves of the texture, right? So and then knowing something about the cut might be helpful to getting it to focus. Okay, so some things that you might describe, the color, the lighting. You can see that the lighting source sort of fills the picture, but it's kind of more concentrated coming in off this side. And you can see the reflection, the glistening. It's glazed. It has a shininess to it in various parts of it, right? So the lighting, items in the image. There's a knife. There's the ribs. There's this cup, the sauce cup, and you see the brush. And you can think about the texture, right? The meat itself has like a ridging to it, and then the burnt ends, it looks kind of sandpaper-ish, right? So things about the texture and also what has been done. When the smoking is done, of course, the internal temperature hits 165 to make it food safe. And then once you get to 192, the collagen starts to break down and it gets really soft and, all that good stuff. So you could also perhaps describe some of the procedure that was involved in doing it, because in that procedure is some sequences of words and hopefully in outputs that describe what it might look like. It was overcooked. So if it was overcooked, it might not have the burnt ends. The whole thing might be dried out and not look the same. Does that make sense? Okay. So let me ask you another question. Anyone follow football, professional football, NFL? Okay, some of you. So let me ask you, how would you describe this picture? Touchdown pass? Okay. A Hail Mary? Okay, touchdown, Hail Mary. What is happening in the image? Tom Brady. Tom Brady's not there. He's dead to me now. No, joking. What's he leave the team? Hooper. Hooper? Okay, so the name of the individuals in the picture. What about the teams, maybe? Okay, the Titans. So in the end zone, it's a pass in the end zone, and he's over somebody else, right? So they're going up for a pass. What about what's in the picture behind them? The stands, right? So you can almost imagine the crowd noise. You see some people here, maybe some photographers, some security, some officials, right? So staff. Okay. Anything else in the picture? The goalposts, absolutely. And it's an action shot. And you'll notice this is called depth of field in photo. I'm not a photographer, so I just know like maybe one or two small things, right? With depth of field, you'll notice in the foreground, in nice, crisp vibrancy and detail, are the two subjects, but everything off in the background is kind of blurred, right? It kind of brings into perspective the action going. It's an action shot. You freeze in time something that's happening, everything else is blurred. It creates this fixed idea of motion happening, right? So there's a lot of stuff in the description of the image versus just one of the Patriots caught a pass, right? That is very broad in your enormous probability table. But when you focus in on the teams, the player, the type of play, it's a flag or a post play. Well, 2 years of football back, way back, you get into a game, you get hit, and like, this is not good, right? Concussion at 14 is not a good thing. Anyways, I digress. But the more specific you can be, the better the output is appropriate to what you want to do or what you want to generate. And if you know a little bit about photography, you can actually throw out technical terms from a photography standpoint, and it will pick up on that down to even, and I didn't know this, it surprised me when I was doing this research for this class, you can even tell it the type of camera and the type of lens setting, and it'll just make that for you. But you have to know a lot of technical stuff about photography to understand that, because I'm just a point and shoot type of person. But nonetheless, talk about the teams, the individuals, the position. One is over the other, the location, maybe the lighting, the type of action happening, the backdrop. They're in the end zone at the corner, catching a pass, and the style, right? This is a depth of field. The foreground is crisp, the background is blurred, capturing action shot frozen in time. Does that make sense? And so the ability to effectively tell this large language model, Bob Ross, what to do is really, really important. And sometimes you'll find you have to learn a little bit of technical information to get the right type of effect that you desire. Does that make sense? Any question? Okay. And of course, it's kind of nice to tinker with it, right? How you get good at it is by practicing it because certain things, the way you say it, the things you include are going to dramatically shape the type of output that you get. Okay. Any questions? No? All right. So let's look at an approach, and I'm going to kind of shorten things a little bit because we lost some time because of the technical difficulties. So imagine you have a sorcerer, and you're a sorcerer conjuring up magic, but in our case, it's not magic, it's just some probability and relationships over a massive amount of data, image data, word data, and image and word data together. And so with this, you're going to try to conjure up a style. And so with the style for imaging, you want to be as specific as you can. Maybe it's a Picasso style. And again, I'm not an art person. I'm not a photography person. So excuse me if I fumble over this part. So if you ever look at a type of oil painting style, it has the broad strokes and you see the brush and you see the texture of the paint. There's an actual style like that that you can impose on your images. You could literally take this football picture and say, make it look like a Picasso, right? I don't know why you'd want to, but you can, right? Knowing something about what a Picasso and how a Picasso is different from um, I don't know styles. I mean, how is different from like, the Scream, that one? How is different? It'll certainly apply it. But nonetheless, you can, like a sorcerer, summons up the style that you want. And when you summons up that style, it's taking all of those examples of what relationships together reflect that style, and it'll apply it to the type of picture that you want it to output for you. And then you want to think about the tool you're using. And so different large language model tools are better or worse for certain types of things. They'll all output pictures, but some are better than others for certain types of operations. And so for things like Midjourney and DALL-E, based on a technology called Stable Diffusion, it might be better at, for example, giving you photorealistic pictures, things that don't look like drawings or paintings, things that look like actual pictures of real things, right? So you want to pay attention based on what you're doing to select the right tool for the right type of job. Now, certainly many of these will require, getting the pro version or having an add-on for something. But for our purposes, using Copilot through the license available through your Outlook for Clark is good enough for what we're doing. But as you go further and progress in your careers and your training and stuff like that, you want to, like many endeavors, select the right tool for the right job, right? Any questions? No? All right. So, and then hang in there, try again, because you will propose something and maybe the style isn't quite what you expected. And you select a different tool and then you tell it to modify what you've done. You're sort of redirecting that part of the probability table that it's selected and choosing something else. And so keep in mind that it's an interactive thing. You get an output, you ask it to change it. Maybe you're changing the style. You can have the same picture as a Picasso, as a photo, as a line drawing, as anime, as whatever. But it's up to you to keep iterating in your interaction with it to try to get the type of output that coincides with this vision that you have in your head of what it is you want. Does that make sense? Any questions? Yes, Clarence.
So the tools,
Mhm.
the Midjourney and DALL-E, would those pop up on the Copilot?
They would not. You'd have to Google search for it. And then DALL-E is from is it OpenAI? I think it's from OpenAI. They're from different companies, and so you'd have to search for them. I am not certain that Copilot would tell you DALL-E is a better choice, right? Because they want to make that money themselves. If you wanted to generate something that the license that through Outlook didn't have, most likely they would recommend something of theirs that they want you to pay more for. And that's a specific business decision. It's not a technology issue. So you'd have to search for it yourself through a Google search and then look at different tools. But the good news is there are lots of people online who have lots of opinions about these various tools. Between YouTube and just a Google search, you'll find something that is or tries to be an honest review of the benefits and drawbacks of each one. Okay. Now, this is from the book, and the book tends to be more Chat GPT centric, right? Keeping that in mind. Okay. Any other questions?
Quick comment.
Oh, yeah, sure.
There's not daily as if I was out with border,
Mhm.
I go there, I go out with border.
Mhm.
Can be better, switch it to an academic document.
Yes.
I like it, but I thought the border one was way better.
Yes. And then you're,
The one I submit, so I just left it alone.
oh, good, good. You're basically doing what I call adopting a posture. You can almost imagine you're an actor and you're putting on a costume and serving in a particular role. And in serving in that role, it has a certain style, a certain cadence, a certain way of talking, a certain way of presenting things. And absolutely, that's spot on. When you say pretend you're a journalist versus pretend you're a research scholar, it's going to have different ways of evaluating and talking about the same thing. Mhm. Mhm. And you could even say, for fun, pretend you're an elementary school student, right? So this one was a meanie, and this one did that. You could do all sorts of fun stuff to try to maybe if you wanted to explain something to a young child, right? You'd say things differently, maybe leave some things out, put some things in. And so absolutely putting on that proverbial costume is a really good way of setting the tone for the language model when it's outputting something. Okay. All right. And you could even take the same subject and have different personas and get a dramatically different output and style.
Yeah, I remember that actually it was like a new pro before.
Mhm.
Now pro United States.
Yes.
Pro Iran.
Yes.
I wanted to be that new pro.
Mhm. And then if you tried it, the same prompts with different language models, you're going to get some stylistic differences, which is also interesting as well. But hang in there, try again. And over time, you learn this prompting approach, having the tone, getting it to focus down, and negotiating really what the type of output is that you desire from it. Okay. Any questions? No, makes sense? Yeah. All right. And so the goal is to be descriptive. So let me ask you a question. If I said the word, a picture of a dog, so take a second to think about that. What kind of dog do you think about? A big dog? So something like this? German Shepherd, Golden Retriever? Okay. So something like this? A lab? A retriever? Golden? Well, I only had so many pictures. A black lab? Yeah. What about something like this? The Chihuahuas are vicious. They're little, but they have some attitude, right? But that's just, to say that even just among us, if I said a picture of a dog, there are a lot of different examples. And so if you said to Copilot, give me a picture of a dog, it's just going to pick something from a vast array of dogs and relationships between dog parts that it has. And so it's more likely to pick something, honestly, that's less work, right? It doesn't want to have to search through, hundreds of thousands of computers, spanning dozens of data centers. It's just going to pick something that it has ready and available. And invariably, that's not going to be what you had in mind. Okay.
Imagine if we give you a picture of the ugliest dog.
Mm-hmm.
The thing to do every year for the ugliest dog in the world.
Mm-hmm. I remember that one. If you gave it an example, it's going to take that example, maybe do some variations and give it back to you and assume that's the style or the set of relationships that are interesting to you.
Head on a dog body,
Yeah.
make it like a realistic picture.
Mhm.
Born.
Absolutely. And now you see on social media pictures of of cats and dogs doing dances and cooking and all sorts of stuff, working at Chick-fil-A and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of stuff. And that's generating video. Um, and that's probably most likely, oh, I know for a fact, you're gonna have to get the quote unquote pro versions of things to be able to generate videos. If you think about it, it's an interesting feature and they want to make money off of it. But also it's going to use many more resources when you generate video versus text. Absolutely. So let's try this exercise. A detailed photorealistic, so not a drawing, not a cartoon. It looks like an actual picture of an actual dog. Close-up picture, so it's not far away from the camera, so to speak. A close-up of a golden retriever puppy. So we're shaping both the type of dog, the age of the dog, some more details about the actual picture. Now, if we add more detail with wet fur, that's a different part of the probability table versus just a dog, because we never said wet fur before. It's just going to choose fur, right? Because we never were specific about it. Sitting in a lush green forest, lush, there's a lot of green, it's very dense. That's even more specific about the setting where this dog is in the photo. So you can imagine you tell Bob Ross, I would like a puppy with wet fur. He's okay, here's a little puppy. It's in a lush green forest. Okay, we're going to have a lot of greenery around it. After a rain shower. So after the rain shower, that means the forest, lush green forest, is going to look different than if it was just a dry, sunny day. The leaves are going to glisten because when they're wet, they're kind of shiny. Maybe some of them will have some um, uh, beads of water dripping off them. I almost said tears, right? Beads of water dripping off of them, and so forth. Okay, with dewdrops on the leaves. That's sort of painting a picture, getting more and more specific about the setting, and soft morning light filtering through the trees. You can almost imagine it, right? It's not nighttime because if you didn't say anything, it would just pick something. So soft morning light. So maybe there are some parts where it's brighter because the sun is shining through. Maybe you might see the beams of light coming through the canopy of the forest. So we do all that, and even this, and this surprised me. Imagine it's a Canon EOS 5D Mark IV camera taking the photo. Now, I don't know photography, but I looked it up, and this is a really nice camera. This is like a professional grade camera, and you can do all sorts of stuff with the photography. So you can tell it, not imagine, um, produce a photo that would have been created with this type of camera. And so conceivably, there's a lot of data of examples of photos taken on this camera with various settings. So it has encoded in that probability table relationships between parts of images that are consistent with this camera versus some other camera. Does that make sense? So we do all that, and I copied and pasted this into Copilot, and I got this picture. Oh, right, puppy. And so all of that, you see the wet fur, you see the glistening drops on the leaves. You see the sun kind of coming through the canopy, the bright glow of the sun, and it looks like it's morning. You see the dewdrops on the leaves, sitting in a lush green forest. It's a close-up and it's a golden retriever puppy. And so this is literally what I got when I inputted all of these as a prompt. And if you give the same prompt, sometimes it gives you different pictures, but nonetheless, this is what I got from this. Does that make sense? And so if you just said a golden retriever puppy, it would give you a different photo than if you said with wet fur, lush green forest, and so forth. Now, when you said the up close picture, I'm imagining that specifying this technical equipment is going to produce this depth of field. You notice in the foreground, the puppy is crisp and high resolution, and then the surrounding around it is kind of blurred, right? That's a specific effect that people go for with various lenses. And again, I don't know photography, right? So I would leave it to you to ask Copilot to teach you about this aspect of imagery. Any questions? No? All right. And so you could use other adjectives to modify. A happy dog is too general. A joyful, energetic, fluffy, small white dog is more descriptive. You could define the subject and the action. We saw that in the football picture, right? In the end zone, corner catch jumping over the defender. The defender is turned towards him, trying to break up the pass. The ball is behind the head of the defender. And so here, when you define a subject and the action, you're giving it more information to produce some visuals that are consistent with that action. So you could have an ancient wizard who's wearing a robe and has a long white beard standing on a mountain peak, and there's a sunset, and there's a vibrant blue energy spell coming from this sorcerer's, this wizard's hands, right? So this is about using words to effectively paint a picture. And the more specific you are, the more action oriented, the more you attend to details that matter, the more likely you are to get a particular desired effect generated by the tool. Does that make sense? All right. So keeping in mind that the Copilot subscription can only do so much. It's good enough for many things, but if you really get into some very technical things from photography, at some point it might begin to show its limitations. Okay? All right. Any questions? No? All right. And so you could also, like we saw in this description for the yellow lab puppy, look at the environment and the setting. What's the weather? What's the lighting? What do you see? You see the dew on the leaves. You see the morning sun radiating through the canopy. What's in the background? Because that impacts how the look and feel ultimately of the image plays out. So you could say, show me a picture, a backdrop of a castle. Okay, there are many castles. Or you could say it's a crumbling medieval stone castle on a misty hill. So you can kind of see the fog kind of hanging around in this picture, silhouetted against a stormy purple sky, right? And so any opportunity to describe the setting, the weather, the environment, which is framing your picture, so to speak, is really good to focus the model on a specific set of relationships that are consistent with the type of output you desire. Any questions? No? Okay. And then the composition and framing. That has to do with more technical stuff from photography. You might want a wide shot, a bird's eye view. There's one approach I've seen where people have the camera down near the ground. That's an interesting effect. Or a dynamic action shot like we saw with football. Now, when you do this, of course, those are loaded phrases from photography. And so a priori, the recommendation is to learn a little bit about photography, different aspects of it, to try to understand about how different shots and framing might impact the look and feel of the resulting image. Does that make sense? Any questions? No? So it's almost like you're a producer and you're directing a staff to do things for you. And the more detail you can provide, the better to get out of this model the thing that you desire. Okay, so there's things like lighting, morning light, cinematic, and then the color palette affects the look and feel, like the warm autumn colors versus sepia tone. And I had to look up what sepia is, that kind of old photo brownish kind of thing that you have for some photos is called sepia. I didn't know what that was. Again, I'm not a photographer. All right. And then the artistic style. You could say make it like an oil painting, make it like an old 80s Polaroid picture, right? You make it like a pencil drawing, make it like anime. You can impose a style on the same picture. I could take the puppy photo or the football photo and make it look like Japanese anime, right? Or make it look like a watercolor painting. And it'd be a dramatically different feel to the photo versus the actual photorealistic output that you saw. And so you could even specify technical things like imagine I process it with Unreal Engine or Photoshop in a certain way, and it'll go ahead and it apply that to that image. Okay. So I'm gonna probably end with this. I can't remember what I said here. The whole Croft-C framework that we talked about last time with prompt engineering, you can absolutely do that for imagery. And so you have a context, the theme. I'm trying to make some artwork for a fantasy video game. You're kind of setting, okay, it'll might be dark or it might be mystic or it might be in the woods with fog and certain type of lighting and a lightning storm and stuff like that. So you set your context and then you give the role. I want it to be a photograph or I want it to be an oil painting. I want it to look like I use watercolors to generate this. And then an objective that talks about the mood conveyed in that image. The character might be isolated but hopeful, or maybe the character is contemplating something, or the character is deep in thought. So you can create sort of a mood to your photos, and the language model for the language model, it'll help shape the type of visuals that you see in the output. You can take a look at the form, right? Photorealistic, that imposes a style on the image. You can look at the tone. All right, it should be awe-inspiring. It should be dark and mysterious, and so forth. And then the conditions, right? You might want to say, I don't want people to be in it. Maybe it's purely animals. Maybe it's certain restrictions that are going to help the visual, depending on what the output is that you so desire. Does that make sense? And so this is a framework recommended by the book. It's certainly not the only way to do it, but it's something that's repeatable. And the idea, if you're going to use this for productivity, you want to have a process to follow that is repeatable, that you can kind of get the same or similar type of thing out of it that you desire. And then you can imagine each one of these parameters in the CROFC framework as being these control knobs. I can change it from oil painting to anime, from anime to watercolor. All of a sudden, you get the same idea, but the style that you apply is dramatically different. So having a way of thinking about the levers that you manipulate to get certain outputs, you can almost imagine or have an expectation of what's going to happen as a result of changing one of these or manipulating one of these controls. Does that make sense? Okay. So it's now 7:25. I don't remember what I had. Let me um, talk about platforms a little bit. There's Midjourney, and I have some links in the PDF. So if you wanted to navigate to it, they're different. They're good for different things, right? And it's not to say DALL-E is bad and Midjourney is better. It's just if you're going to focus on certain types of aspects of manipulation, that one might be better for that particular thing. And so, for example, Midjourney is great for high-end aesthetics, making things get a particular detailed look, imaginative storytelling, and if you're going to do art posters. DALL-E is better for conceptual scenes. It's not as good as Midjourney for aesthetics, but it still can do some of that. And then Ideogram, which I'd never heard of, it's great for graphics that include text. And then Dream Studio, it looks like it has a lot of very small things that you can tinker related to the content of those images. So you could say oil painting with a certain type of brush or a certain type of paint or something like that. So all of these are particularly good at one tiny corner of what it means to be an image, but they'll all generate images for you. It's just that for certain types of advanced operations, one might be better than the other. Does that make sense? Okay. And so audio, the only thing I'll say about audio, because the Copilot subscription that we have, I've tried it with a bunch of things and it does horrible. It has kind of muted sound like wow, wow, wow. And I asked for a boom clap drum riff on loop, and it couldn't do that, right? Not how I wanted to. So with a pro version, you can almost imagine your own mix master, editor, and producer. You need clarity, just like with the images, but you have to understand certain things from audio and music, right? Like tempo, rhythm, acoustics. If you try to do things like uh, give me the bass riff from Michael Jackson, Beat It, it's going to say, that's copyrighted material. I won't do it. But if you say, give me a bass riff inspired by Michael Jackson, Beat It, then it'll produce something that is eerily similar, but not the same, because in their algorithms, they're concerned about copyright violations. Because if you produce something that's exactly Michael Jackson Beat It bass riff, whoever owns his estate, I guess his kids, the lawyers are going to come after you, right? Because they don't want to get sued. So they say, well, it wasn't me, it was ChatGPT. And ChatGPT, that'd be an interesting battle. Michael Jackson's estate lawyers against ChatGPT's lawyers, right? I mean, epic struggle. But nonetheless, they would go after ChatGPT, and they want to make sure that they're not opening themselves up to lawsuit, right? So you have to understand a lot about music in order to be specific about what you want from an audio track. But you can imagine assuming the role of mixmaster, editor, producer, and so forth, the types of beats and tracks and songs and scores and things that you can output with these Pro Tools. And so you can have styles, you can select instruments, give me the hi-hat, give me the bass, come in with the tenor sax, rip a chord on this, and with a rhythm on that. Now, I don't understand a huge amount, some about music, but certainly you can play with tempos, you can play with keys and sounds and notes and instruments and loops and all sorts of cool stuff. And so looking at the structure, you can also talk about influences. I want call and response between the two horns, and they're slightly out of sync, and then they come together and play the same hook on the melody, right? You can do all sorts of cool stuff with this. Now, of course, you have to be careful, as I said before, inspired by. Because if you ask it to play a specific thing, it's not. It's going to refuse, right? And it's really hard to get it. It won't to circumvent that, right? So you want to be careful about copyright, inspired by, and not exactly. Does that make sense? All right. You can also, there's a Croft-C framework for music. In addition to music, you can do soundscapes. You can create sounds like sounds of nature. You're in the wilderness. You hear the rustling of the leaves as the wind blows. You hear the birds chirping off in the background. And then to make it really realistic, I thought it was pretty cool. Like if you're walking through the woods, sometimes you hear a snap of a stick, an occasional snap of a stick, right? Which adds to realism. So you can have generic soundscapes. You can put sounds together. You can have sounds that give emotional impact. You start out very quiet, and then it's sort of a wandering melody. And then you have two melodies come together. They get louder, going to crescendo. And then you have the outro that has a certain vibe to it. So you can create sounds that create moods. And then you can also have voices, narrations. Now, of course, the sound feature and the narration feature in Copilot is horrible. You'd have to get the pro version for it to get better. But it'll create sounds. It won't do what you ask it. I've tried it, and I couldn't get it to do a basic bass loop, bass riff on loop. But certainly, and I'll just sort of hand wave over this, you can describe the persona of a speaker. So with the right subscription, you can create a speaker to narrate something for you or to tell a story. So you can say the age, you can say the gender. I tried to play with race and Copilot wouldn't do it, right? I tried to say a Southern accent, tried to say Jamaican accent, and it kind of shied away from that. But nonetheless, you can tinker with accents, with age of a voice, a childlike voice or an older sounding voice, a deep voice or a bright voice. You can look at the tone, warm and friendly, professional, clinical, all sorts of things. So you can produce narrations and produce voices that capture certain type of cadence and qualities to it. Now, again, if you know a lot about sound and voice, you can be more and more technical, but certainly with these models, you can have narrators and voices out. Now, on social media, there is somebody has a fake set of videos singing in the style of kind of like Bill Evans, kind of like a 50s African American Southern crooner, right? And it's all fake. It's all produced because I looked for the artist name, like, wait, that's fake. That's not real, right? It almost sounds like oh, I can't remember the name. I know the song. But anyway, so the 50s pre-Motown black Southern crooner, sort of middle-aged 50, 60 years old, that genre, right? Um, so people are doing all sorts of stuff. They're producing entire tracks within a certain style, and they're getting clicks and hits online doing that. And this is completely manufactured. And so that's just to say you can produce a lot of rich content, but it doesn't come for free. And when I say that, I don't mean paying for a pro license. You have to understand something about the domain to be able to manipulate those levers to provide enough specificity to get the type of output that you desire. But you can also learn that stuff, right? There are a lot of people bootstrapping that as we speak and putting stuff online. So that's all I had. I'm going to stop there, and we can certainly take a break now and pick back up with the second half and try out some stuff with the image generation to get you bootstrapped and started towards assignment number 4. So again, sorry for the technical difficulties. Now I know I opened the secret panel and I disconnect and reconnect. So we can take like a 10-minute break and pick back up second half, do some practical stuff. But it's actually fun to watch it manipulate the images. You trying something? Let me stop the video, and I hope the video came through this time.